Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about something most people think they understand, but really don't: how people go from absolutely nothing to absolutely everything. No magic wand, no rich uncle, no perfect timing. Just raw hustle, discomfort, a few close calls, and usually a string of questionable decisions along the way. Picture this: you're staring at the ceiling of a cheap apartment, the kind where you can hear your neighbor's Wi-Fi breathing. You've got $27.43 in your bank account, a laundry list of regrets, and a dream that feels so out of reach it might as well be listed on Zillow. Sounds dramatic, I know. But here's the kicker: you probably won't survive it. Most don't. The odds are somewhere between tragic and hilarious. But for the tiny fraction who do, it's not luck. It's something else entirely. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. I mean it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where our little zero to something crew is tuning in from. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. It started, as many things do, with a pitiful kind of silence. I remember walking through a grocery store with a stomach so empty it echoed, and pockets so light they might as well have been decorative. I passed a row of instant noodles, 5 packs for $1, and felt the burn of humiliation. Not because I couldn't afford them, but because I had to calculate whether I could afford them and still keep the electricity on. People love to talk about the grind. They romanticize it, throw a lo-fi beat under it, and call it motivational. But the grind isn't aesthetic. The grind is quietly eating crackers for dinner while pretending you're intermittent fasting. The grind is washing your only nice shirt in the sink and praying it dries by morning. It's not pretty, but it's real. I wish I could tell you I had a plan. That I opened some ancient book, learned 12 millionaire secrets, and suddenly everything clicked. But the truth is, I didn't even know what I wanted. I just knew I couldn't stay here anymore. This version of me, tired, broke, scared, he wasn't built to last. And somewhere in that fog of uncertainty, I realized something that felt both terrifying and freeing. No one was coming to save me. It's a strangely empowering moment, when you stop looking around and start looking inward. When you stop waiting and start crawling. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I had a 5-hour plan: make it to the next meal, the next job interview, the next sunrise. And honestly, that was enough. Let me tell you a weird fact to lighten the mood. The average cloud weighs over 1,000,000 pounds. Just floats up there like it owns the sky. I think about that sometimes. How something so heavy can still hang in the air, while I, just one human, feel like I'm being crushed by things I can't even see. That first year was ugly. I bounced between temp jobs and night shifts. I sold old electronics online, did surveys for pennies, and once got paid $40 to dress up as a giant taco for a food truck launch. The pictures still haunt me, by the way. But here's the thing: I showed up. Even when I didn't believe in myself, I showed up. And showing up is underrated. We like to talk about manifesting success like the universe is some customer service rep that takes requests. But success doesn't respond to wishes. It responds to work. Every morning I'd wake up and ask, what can I do today that gets me 1 inch closer to something better? Sometimes that answer was learning a new skill. Sometimes it was just not quitting. A good friend of mine, okay, I'm lying, it was a random TED Talk, once said, rock bottom isn't a foundation. It's a trampoline. I didn't believe it at the time. But looking back? Maybe it was. It's also worth mentioning that in the field of human intelligence, there's still no universal agreement on what intelligence actually is. Some say it's problem solving. Others say it's emotional regulation. I think it's the ability to survive when everything's stacked against you and still somehow find something to laugh about. Speaking of laughing, you know sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins? No reason. I just thought you deserved a breather after that existential spiral. Anyway, I didn't have fancy credentials. No Ivy League pedigree, no startup funding. What I did have was time, and I used it. Nights became my classroom. I'd watch free lectures, read articles, follow tutorials. I learned copywriting, basic coding, how to make a mean landing page. I freelanced under 3 different names just to make it look like I had a team. Spoiler alert, it was just me in a hoodie. And still, every day felt like walking a tightrope blindfolded. There were weeks where everything felt like it was crumbling. One client ghosted me after I delivered a project. Another paid me in cryptocurrency I couldn't even cash out. At one point, my laptop broke and I had to trade 2 months' worth of freelance work for a dusty second-hand replacement. I named it Lazarus. It lasted 6 months. But somehow, through all the missteps and makeshift fixes, I started seeing signs of traction. Small things. A returning client. A $500 invoice paid on time. A stranger complimenting my portfolio. It felt like someone handing me a glass of water in the middle of a desert. You see, the path from zero to something isn't linear. It's not even paved. It's a minefield. But it's your minefield. And that means you get to choose how you walk it. If you're in that place right now, the place where everything hurts and nothing works, know this: you are not broken. You are just becoming. And somewhere inside all that chaos, there's a version of you building itself. One stubborn step at a time. Rock bottom smells like stale ramen, cheap laundry soap, and the kind of quiet that hums like an insult. There's a strange stillness in that space. Not peaceful stillness, more like your life is buffering and no one hit refresh. That's where I was, beneath the bottom, emotionally duct taped together, pretending the word potential wasn't just code for currently useless. They don't warn you about the boredom of rock bottom. Everyone thinks it's all tragic and cinematic, tears on the floor, dramatic soundtrack, meaningful monologue. Nah. It's mostly a dull loop of sleeping too long, eating too little, and avoiding mirrors. You try not to think too much because thinking starts spiraling. What's the point? Why try? Who even cares? Me. Eventually, I cared. But first, I had to stop pretending I didn't. It got bad before it got worse. I remember the week the power got cut. I lit candles like I was summoning ancestors. Spoiler, they didn't show up. I warmed soup over a tea light, and swore it gave me a new appreciation for cavemen. I had 1 pair of good socks left, and wore them like a crown. You start measuring success in dry towels and working phone chargers. And yet, within that slow collapse was something weirdly alive. Some little voice whispering, "This ain't it." Not in a judgmental way, more like a tired friend nudging you awake. Like, "Hey champ, you wanna stay stuck here forever or maybe do anything else?" Your brain wants to keep you alive, not help you grow. That's why it often chooses freeze over fight. It's not laziness. It's a survival strategy. But growth starts when we recognize the freeze and move anyway. And breaking out of that wasn't a motivational moment. It was a Wednesday. I was sitting on the floor with a spoon and half a jar of peanut butter when my landlord knocked to remind me the 3rd notice meant last. I nodded, smiled, closed the door, and just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed, like a person pretending to meditate but really disassociating. Then I laughed. Laughed so hard I almost dropped the peanut butter. Because suddenly, the absurdity of it all hit me. I was broke, jobless, possibly homeless, and my last meal was essentially a nut-based paste. It was either laugh or unravel completely. So I picked laugh. There's a term in psychology: post-traumatic growth. Some researchers argue that after a major crisis, some people come out stronger, more focused. Others say it's wishful thinking, that not everyone finds meaning in suffering. The debate's still open. But I know this: that night, something in me shifted. Not dramatically. Not heroically. But just enough. I decided I'd do one thing different the next day. Just one. So I got up at 6:30 a.m. and went for a walk. No phone. No headphones. Just the sound of my shoes on cracked sidewalk and a brain slowly rebooting. I didn't know it then, but that single act, choosing motion over misery, was the first real win in a long time. Walking turned into thinking. Thinking turned into writing. Writing turned into pitching freelance gigs to strangers on the internet like a polite spam bot. I had no experience, just attitude and access to Google. I learned how to fake confidence, how to write an invoice, how to sound like I'd done this 100 times. The truth? I hadn't even done it once. And still, I kept sending emails. Applying. Getting rejected. Ghosted. Occasionally insulted. One guy told me I was delusionally optimistic. I printed that out and stuck it on the wall. Felt like a badge. Quick random detour. Did you know wombat poop is cube-shaped? Totally unrelated. But if you're feeling like your life is a mess, just remember, some creatures naturally produce perfect cubes and still don't have a 401k. Anyway. A week later someone said yes. It was a $75 blog post about kitchen countertops. I knew nothing about countertops, but I wrote that thing like it was going in the Smithsonian. I researched granite like it held state secrets. When the client sent back, "Great work, thanks," I stared at the screen for a full 10 minutes. Not because I was proud, because I realized I just made money with words. From my brain. While still being me. It was humbling, exhilarating, and weirdly exhausting. I slept like I'd just run a marathon. No one tells you that success doesn't feel like fireworks at first. Sometimes, it feels like fear. Because when you realize your life can change, and all it takes is effort, there's nowhere left to hide. It's not the world holding you back anymore. It's you. And that truth? That's where freedom begins. I had no safety net. But I had curiosity. And stubbornness. And a cheap laptop that sounded like a dying fan every time I opened Chrome. The more I worked, the more I learned. And the more I learned, the less helpless I felt. Not powerful yet. Not successful. But capable. And that was enough to keep going. There's a fact floating around the internet that humans are the only species that blush. Apparently, it's tied to our capacity for empathy and embarrassment. Isn't that wild? We literally leak red when we feel seen. Maybe that's what success is, learning how to stay seen even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. The people who make it from zero? They don't have magic. They have audacity. The gall to say, "I'm not done yet," when the world writes them off. The nerve to try again when logic says, "Why bother?" And trust me, logic will say that. Daily. But you know what else gets louder with each tiny win? Hope. Not the Disney kind. The gritty, scarred kind. The kind that limps in after you fall down and whispers, "Cool bruise. Try again." That's where I lived for a long time. Not in certainty, but in that shaky space between desperation and discovery. Between the worst version of myself and the one I hadn't met yet. I stayed there long enough to start climbing out. The truth is, there's no thunderclap when your life changes. No booming voice, no slow-mo montage. It usually comes wrapped in boredom, or disguised as a random Tuesday. That's how it was for me, the moment I decided not just to survive, but to build something. Started with a janky Wi-Fi connection and an email that had sat in my drafts for 3 days. It was a pitch. Short, awkward, probably full of typos. But I sent it. And then I sent another. And another. 57 pitches later, yes, I counted, I got a reply that wasn't just a polite no, or the digital equivalent of being ghosted. It was, "Can you start Monday?" I stared at the screen for so long I started seeing tiny pixel ghosts. That was the turning point. Not because it was my dream job. Spoiler, it was writing product descriptions for lawn furniture. Glamorous. But because it proved I could claw my way into the game. Even from the nosebleed seats. Even with nothing but a half-baked portfolio and a gut full of nerves. People think turning points come with fanfare. They don't. They sneak in when you've finally been beat up enough to surrender your pride. Because pride will absolutely keep you broke. Pride says, "I'm too good for this." But hunger? Hunger says, "This'll do until I find better." and hunger gets things done. There's a phrase floating around in business circles, start ugly. It means don't wait until it's perfect. Don't wait until your logo's polished, your skills are sharp, or your website doesn't look like it was built in 1997. Just start. Ugly, crooked, confused, doesn't matter. Movement beats mastery. At that time, I was all movement and zero mastery. But movement creates momentum. Let me tell you something nerdy. In physics, there's a principle called inertia. Objects at rest stay at rest, and objects in motion? They stay in motion. That was me, finally in motion. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was moving in a direction that didn't involve circling the drain. Every new gig taught me something. How to write fast. How to handle bad clients. How to fake professionalism until I could afford real professionalism. There was a kind of magic in it, the scrappiness, the chaos. I was like a raccoon in a recycling bin, no dignity, but resourceful as hell. Now I know someone's probably thinking, that's great, but not everyone can just freelance or write. True. But everyone can figure out what tiny skill they already have and who might pay for it. I knew a guy who got started offering custom insults on Fiverr. I'm not kidding. He made $400 in his first week roasting people's exes. It's not about the path, it's about moving forward. Pick a lane. Hell, invent one. The people who start from zero and win? They get really good at finding the crack in the wall. Just a sliver of opportunity, and they pry it open with everything they've got. It's like that phrase from cognitive psychology. Perceptual narrowing. Under stress, our brain starts tuning out possibilities. Tunnel vision. But the second you relax, even slightly, you start noticing side doors you never saw before. That's what happened to me. After the third client, I started noticing patterns. Which kinds of people paid fast? Which platforms had the best gigs? Which types of work drained me, and which kind made me forget time? I started choosing better. Saying no more. Asking for more money, my voice cracking the first few times, but cracking confidently. One of the weirdest parts? I started to like who I was becoming. I had this beat-up notebook where I wrote 3 things every day. 1. One thing I learned. 2. One thing I failed at. 3. One thing I did anyway. Sometimes it was embarrassing. Learned, don't call the client by the wrong name. Failed, forgot to attach the document. Did anyway, pitched 5 more jobs. But you know what? That notebook became my proof. That I was changing. That I was showing up. That I was still in it. Random fun fact, the shortest war in history lasted just 38 minutes. Between Britain and Zanzibar in 1896. So if you're worried that your business failed fast, just remember, it probably lasted longer than Zanzibar's military campaign. Anyway, every few weeks, I'd glance back at where I'd started. Same apartment. Same tiny desk. But I wasn't the same. And that, more than money, more than validation, was the real breakthrough. People started asking for my advice. Me. The same guy who once debated selling his winter coat to buy printer ink. I wasn't exactly some guru, but I had been in the pit. And I'd started climbing out. Turns out, that's worth something. There's this open debate in neuroscience about whether change is more driven by habits or by emotional spikes, those moments of extreme joy or pain that rewire our brain. Personally, I think it's both. The spike gets your attention. But the habit keeps your trajectory. My spike was hunger and fear. My habit? Showing up. I made a rule. 2 hours a day minimum. Even if I was tired, even if I had a headache, even if I wanted to binge-watch shows until my eyes fell out. 2 hours of learning, pitching, working something. Every day. Because consistency doesn't care how you feel. It only cares if you show up. Funny thing, once I stopped waiting for permission, people started giving it to me anyway. Clients offered bonuses. Someone invited me onto a podcast. A small company offered me a retainer contract. Me. The delusionally optimistic one. And just like that, The dirt beneath my feet started feeling less like a grave and more like ground I could plant in. Let me be clear, I was still broke. But I was broke on purpose. Every dollar had a job. Every hour had a direction. And I'd trade that over aimless comfort any day. So if you're waiting for your big moment, stop. Create a small one. Pitch one person. Learn one thing. Try one dumb idea. Ugly beginnings are still beginnings. And remember, the crack in the wall only matters if you see it. I didn't plan to start small. I wanted to start big. Who doesn't? I used to daydream about waking up one day and just being successful. Like a glitch in the matrix where suddenly my bank account had commas, my inbox was full of glowing praise, and I had assistants named Claudia and Doug. But reality prefers the slow burn. Starting small isn't sexy. It doesn't get applause or retweets. It's quiet, awkward, repetitive. But it's also the secret sauce. The piece everyone skips over when they brag about the grind. Truth is, small beginnings are what build unshakable foundations. Anyone can get lucky once. But learning how to build something tiny and keep it alive? That's an art. I started with $75 blog posts. Then $100 ones. Then $250. Every time I got paid, I reinvested, not into fancy things, but into tools, courses, and time. I upgraded my $9 a month internet to a whopping $30 plan and felt like a tech mogul. I bought noise-canceling headphones from a pawn shop. I stopped eating instant noodles. Okay, that's a lie, I still ate them. But I added vegetables, and that felt grown up. Here's the trick with starting small. Treat every small task like it matters. Because it does. You never know which client has a cousin with a startup, or which blog post becomes your ticket into an industry. My first recurring client? Came from a random cold email I sent at 2 a.m. while half asleep and emotionally compromised. We live in a world addicted to virality. Everyone wants the shortcut, the overnight win, the one weird trick. But here's a fact, about 90% of millionaires didn't inherit wealth. They built it. Slowly. Usually with a lot of mistakes and ugly spreadsheets along the way. I had no secret weapon. Just an embarrassing level of stubbornness and a spreadsheet called Please Don't Be Broke 2020.Excel sex. Small wins stack. You land a small gig. You do well. That person refers you. You raise your rate. You pitch better. You lose some, you win some. You learn. Repeat. 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 There's an odd fact I love. See otters hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart. Completely irrelevant, but also kind of perfect. Because when you're building from nothing, you need anchors. Tiny things that keep you from drifting back into hopelessness. For me, it was my routines. Morning, wake up, stretch, 2 minutes of screaming internally, then coffee. Afternoon, grind. Apply, work, chase invoices, panic. Rinse. Repeat. Evening, reflect, read, watch a documentary about people doing weird things better than me. You ever watch a speed Rubik's Cube competition while you're behind on rent? It's humbling. But those routines? They gave me structure when everything else was chaos. There's a quote in entrepreneurship that floats around a lot: do things that don't scale. That means, early on, you should do the personal outreach, the handwritten thank you emails, the 1:1 calls, the late-night tweaks. Not because they're efficient, but because they teach you the texture of the work. I once spent 4 hours helping a client fix a WordPress bug just because I was curious. It wasn't my job. It wasn't billable. But 3 weeks later, she referred me to her friend, who ran a small business, who then hired me for 6 months. That one small favor snowballed into my first $5,000 gig. And yes, I spent $80 celebrating. On what, you ask? A chair. A really nice chair. Comfort matters. Especially when you spend 12 hours a day working from your kitchen table. Another open debate in psychology: is grit something you're born with or something you grow into? I vote grow. I wasn't gritty to start. I was soft-shelled and over-caffeinated. But every time I got knocked down and didn't stay down, I grew another layer of armor. Tiny things added up, sending that extra pitch, rereading that harsh feedback without crying too much, trying again the next day. Small steps built my resilience. And weirdly, those small steps started attracting bigger ones. One day, I got an email from a company I didn't even pitch. "So-and-so mentioned you, want to chat?" I played it cool in my reply. But in real life, I ran around my apartment like I'd just been drafted by the NBA. The call led to a trial. The trial led to a contract. The contract led to stability, temporary, but real. And here's the twist, even when you do level up, the small mindset sticks. I still double-check my invoices. I still get irrationally excited about a well-written email. I still eat lunch at my desk like a raccoon in a hoodie. Because the small things never stopped mattering. Let me give you a strange little science fact to end on. Bananas are technically berries, but strawberries aren't. Mind blown, right? Just like the idea that your tiny efforts might be the ripest, juiciest, most valuable part of your success story, and you don't even realize it yet. If you're at the very start, scrappy, lost, Googling how to make money online without selling my soul, please know, starting small isn't a delay. It's the process. The best buildings start with the weirdest, ugliest foundations. So take that tiny offer. Build that ugly website. Write that terrible first pitch. Sit in your plastic chair with your off-brand coffee and build something, anything. Small steps. Repeated. With feeling. There's a moment, somewhere around failure number 37, where most people quit. Not dramatically. Quietly. They just stop showing up. They stop trying. They sink into that sweet, sticky pool of, "Maybe it's just not meant for me," which is code for, "This is hard, and I'm tired." And I get it. Because I nearly quit dozens of times. Perseverance isn't loud. It doesn't look like triumph. It looks like quiet consistency. It's clicking submit after another rejection. It's showing up when no one's clapping. It's doing the work, even when motivation disappears. True perseverance lives in the silent spaces where no one is watching, but you keep going anyway. I don't know if I'm naturally disciplined. Honestly, I think I'm just petty. There were days I kept going purely to spite the version of me that wanted to nap through life. That guy didn't get results. You know what did? Boring consistency. Even when I didn't land work, I landed data. I started seeing patterns. What kinds of headlines got replies, which times of day emails got opened, what my best work hours were. I became a scientist of my own hustle. That's something people forget. Success is as much observation as it is action. Point is, self-awareness is an underrated tool in the perseverance toolbox. I started tracking everything: hours worked, pitches sent, money made, tasks completed. Not because I'm a spreadsheet nerd, okay, maybe a little, but because I needed proof I wasn't just spinning my wheels. Because perseverance without direction? That's just stubbornness with a gym membership. I learned to pivot fast. When something didn't work after 3 tries, I reevaluated. Not abandoned, just adjusted. That's the sweet spot, not quitting, but evolving. Like Pokemon, but broke. At one point, I created a folder called Failures. Every bad pitch, every ignored email, every "sorry, not interested." It filled up fast. But I kept it as a weird badge of honor. Proof that I was trying. And the more I failed, the less it hurt. Rejection started feeling like part of the schedule, like taking out the trash. Speaking of trash, did you know New York City produces more than 12,000 tons of garbage a day? That's a lot of waste. But here's the kicker: inside all that mess, people make entire businesses salvaging what others toss out. That's perseverance. That's creativity. That's turning UG into income. Which brings me to this: perseverance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, methodical, unphotogenic. Like answering client messages when your social battery is fried. Or doing your taxes with jazz playing so you don't cry into your spreadsheet. The key? Show up like it matters. Even when no one's watching. Especially then. I remember a 2-week stretch where everything I touched turned to mush. Clients dropped off. Payments delayed. A personal issue pulled me off track. I started slipping, missing alarms, ignoring emails, mentally checking out. It felt like my progress was made of Jenga blocks, and someone just yanked the bottom row. That's when I wrote the 3-word sticky note that lived on my wall for over a year. Show up anyway. Those words saved me more than once. Because sometimes perseverance isn't about pushing harder. Sometimes it's about not disappearing. If all I could do was send one email that day, I sent it. If all I could manage was reviewing an old piece of writing, I did it. The point was to stay tethered. Keep a hand on the wheel, even when the fog rolled in. I kept a mental image that helped, a rusty, old train trying to start. The first chugs are brutal. Loud, ugly, slow. But once it's moving, even a little, it gains momentum. That was me. And probably you too. There's a phrase in educational theory. Desirable difficulty. It means tasks that challenge you just enough to stretch your skills. Not so easy that they're boring, not so hard that they're crushing. That's the zone where real growth happens. And let me tell you, my entire life was one big desirable difficulty. Every new level of work demanded a new level of me. Better boundaries. Clearer communication. Faster decision-making. I got better, not because I'm a genius, but because the stakes were high and the learning curve didn't care about my feelings. Some of my worst failures became the best fuel. Like the time I got completely chewed out by a client for missing a deadline. My fault. I overbooked. Instead of arguing, I apologized, fixed it, and, get this, they rehired me later. Because I owned the mistake. That kind of humility? That's what perseverance teaches you. It's not about flawless execution. It's about relentless correction. Now every time I mess up, and I still do, I ask, what's the next right thing I can do? Not, how do I fix everything? Just one step. Just enough to keep going. Quick detour, octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. That's totally unrelated, but if you've ever cried over a spreadsheet at 2 a.m. while sipping microwave tea, you might as well be part octopus. No judgment, we've all been there. Back to the point. Perseverance also means knowing when to rest. Not quit, rest. I started building in. Non-glam breaks. Walks. Bad TV. Cooking weird meals with stuff from the discount shelf. Those moments reminded me I wasn't a machine. I was a human trying to outstubborn a system designed for burnout. The wild part? The more I leaned into small, consistent effort, the more it compounded. Jobs started finding me. Word-of-mouth referrals trickled in. Clients turned into relationships. My name started floating into rooms I hadn't even entered. That's the silent reward of perseverance. It plants seeds when no one's watching. And eventually, they bloom. So if you're stuck right now, burnout, confused, uninspired, please hear this. You don't need to do something huge today. You just need to do something. One small thing, repeated over time, becomes unstoppable. Just show up. Even when it's awkward. Even when it's boring. Even when it sucks. Especially when it sucks. I used to think failure was the opposite of success. Like they were enemies in some dramatic soap opera. Success in a power suit, failure in a hoodie. But here's what no one tells you until you're deep in the game. Failure is part of success. It's not the villain. It's the weird, sweaty sidekick with good intentions and bad timing. When I started, every failure felt like a death. A missed payment. A client who ghosted. A project that bombed after I put my soul into it. I'd lie awake doing mental postmortems like, should I have used a different font? As if Comic Sans was the reason I didn't make rent. But eventually, I noticed something weird. After each failure, I was a little sharper. I stopped making the same mistake twice. Or 3 times. Okay, 4 tops. But I learned. That's when it clicked. Failure was teaching me. Brutally. Unforgivingly. But consistently. That's the weird thing about growth. You don't usually feel it in the moment. You just notice, one day, you're not panicking over things that used to ruin you. I had a client once who emailed, "This isn't what we expected," after I sent over a 3,000-word article. I reread that message 12 times like it was a breakup text. I considered deleting everything and becoming a sheep farmer. But then I took a breath, reread the brief, and realized I'd misunderstood their tone entirely. My mistake. So I rewrote it. Fast. With professionalism and maybe one passive-aggressive emoji in the draft that never made it to the final send. They loved the revision. They rehired me. That gig turned into a 6-month contract. Failure didn't end the story, it opened it. There's an idea in business called the fail fast model. The concept is that the faster you try, the faster you learn, and the faster you succeed. Not everyone agrees. Some people argue it creates a careless culture. But in the scrappy world of solo survival, failing fast means you get to skip wasting time on things that don't work. I failed at building a dropshipping store. I failed at affiliate marketing. I failed at selling handmade candles, don't ask. I even failed at quitting caffeine. But each of those failures was a breadcrumb. They led me closer to the things I could do well: writing, marketing, creating value. Speaking of value, here's a useless but fun fact: lobsters taste with their feet. Yeah. Imagine if your toes had taste buds. Suddenly that sock on the floor moment becomes a whole new experience. My point? Failure teaches you to see the world differently, even the parts you didn't know had sensory input. Back to reality. I started keeping a lesson log. Nothing fancy, just a list of things I learned every time something went sideways. Like, never assume the client reads the brief the same way you do. Always have a backup of your website. Don't write an angry reply at 2 a.m., write it, save it, delete it at 10 a.m. Eventually, that log became more valuable than any course I'd ever bought. Because it wasn't just knowledge, it was earned wisdom. Scars with a syllabus. People who start from zero don't get to avoid failure, we build with it. There's no cushion, no safety net, no easy introduction. So we learn to adapt. Every mistake becomes a blueprint. Every setback a lesson. We don't fail and fall, we fail and build. I once botched a sales call so badly I accidentally pitched the client their own idea back to them. I still cringe. But I also remember what I did after. I rewrote my pitch template, practiced with a friend, and studied persuasive language. 3 weeks later, I landed a client 3 times bigger. Failure humbles you. But it also sharpens you. In the world of intelligence research, there's a concept called fluid intelligence, your ability to solve new problems. Some researchers argue it peaks in your 20s. Others say experience keeps it active longer. The debate's ongoing. But I know one thing: nothing keeps your brain sharper than failing repeatedly and refusing to stay dumb about it. Failure also teaches emotional regulation. The first time you get rejected, it stings. The 5th time? Still stings. But now you expect it. You build emotional calluses. Not numbness, just resilience. Like a guitarist's fingers after years of playing. You learn to keep strumming, even when the strings bite. One of my favorite weird rituals became my Failure Fridays. I'd set aside a few hours to review all the things that went wrong that week. No guilt. No pity party. Just detective work. What tripped me up? What patterns do I see? What needs tweaking? Then I'd reward myself. A good lunch. A silly YouTube binge. A walk in the park like some whimsical laptop goblin who earned a break. Because failure, when properly processed, deserves a reward. It means you tried. And most people don't. Most people sit on ideas for years. Wait for the timing to be right. Wait to feel ready. They think avoiding failure is safety. But it's just stagnation with better PR. Let me tell you, I'd rather fail at 10 things and learn from all of them than succeed once by accident, and have no idea how it happened. Failure is a breadcrumb trail, not a wall. And when you stop fearing it, you start using it. So if something flopped for you recently, good. Write it down. Pick it apart. And try again. Even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy. Because the people who make it, they're not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who fail smarter. I didn't get where I am alone. That's one of those truths people like to pretend isn't true, especially in the self-made space. But let me be crystal clear, no one makes it on their own. Not really. Somewhere along the way, someone gives you a shot, a nudge, a brutally honest opinion, or a life raft when you're about to drown. In my case, it was a woman named Shay. I met her in a Facebook group for freelancers, one of those chaotic digital spaces full of cat memes, pitch templates, and the occasional motivational quote in Comic Sans. I posted something dumb like, "Why won't anyone hire me?" And instead of roasting me, she sent a DM. "Let me see your portfolio." At the time, my portfolio was a Google Doc with 3 bullet points and a prayer. She looked it over, gave me 3 solid pieces of feedback, and then added, "You're not bad. You're just not clear." That sentence stuck. Because clarity? That's what clients buy. Not potential. Not vibes. Clarity. She didn't charge me. She didn't brag about it later. She just helped. And that small act of generosity? It changed the entire trajectory of my work. That's when I understood the power of community. Not the big, shiny, 50K follower kind. The gritty, messy, DM at 2 a.m. kind. The kind where you ask dumb questions and get real answers. Where people say, "Yeah, me too," instead of, "Figure it out." There's a study floating around, one of many in behavioral psychology, that says social support is a better predictor of long-term success than talent. That's wild. But it makes sense. Because when you're knee-deep in self-doubt and surrounded by tumbleweeds, it's the people who show up for you that matter more than any resume line. I started investing in relationships. Not networking, actual relationships. I joined forums, commented on blogs, slid into DMs without being weird. I gave feedback. I asked for none in return. Not because I'm a saint, but because it feels good to help when you've just been helped. Soon enough, I had a tiny crew. Fellow strugglers, dreamers, grinders. We shared templates, vented about nightmare clients, celebrated $200 wins like lottery tickets. They were my internet coworkers, and they kept me sane. And every once in a while, someone would refer me. A whisper in a Slack group. Hey, you should talk to this guy. That's how momentum really happens, not with viral posts, but with quiet credibility. You know what's weird? Ants. Stick with me. Ants leave scent trails for each other so they can follow the path to food. One ant finds a crumb, lays the path, and others follow. Soon, it's a highway. That's how community works. One person lights the path, and others follow. I wanted to be that ant. So I started sharing more. Blog posts about my freelance journey. Threads about what I learned from terrible client calls. Tips that nobody asked for but someone needed. I didn't have a massive audience. Still don't. But I had impact. People messaged me. "This helped me today." And every time, it made me feel like I wasn't just building a business, I was building a bridge. That's the thing about starting from zero. You become hyper-aware of how valuable small help can be. So you pass it on. You remember what it felt like to Google how to make an invoice, and end up reading 4 different Reddit threads that all contradict each other. You remember the panic of your first unpaid invoice and how one friend's template saved your week. It's not about becoming a guru. It's about becoming a good neighbor. There's an open academic debate around altruism, whether people help others for truly selfless reasons or for some hidden benefit, like feeling good or building reputation. Honestly, I don't care. Because even if kindness is partly selfish, it's still kindness. And it works. The more people I helped, the more I got helped. Not always by the same folks, but by the network. It's like karma, but with better UX. At one point, A former client referred me to someone who was running a course launch. I didn't even know what a launch strategy was, but I said yes and Googled like my life depended on it. That project became my first four-figure job. All because someone vouched for me. Reputation is currency. And your community? That's your bank. I'm not saying you need to be best friends with everyone, or say yes to every collab, but you do need to show up. Share. Ask. Give. Don't just orbit around people, engage with them. And know this, your mentors don't always look like mentors. Sometimes it's a stranger with one golden sentence. Sometimes it's a friend who calls you out kindly. Sometimes it's a person who charges $15 for a 30-minute coaching call that unlocks a blind spot you didn't know you had. I keep a folder of screenshots. Compliments. Referrals. DMs that made me cry in a good way. It's not ego, it's evidence. That people see me. That I matter. That I'm not alone. Want another weird fact? Crows remember faces. If you're kind to them, they'll bring you shiny objects. If you're cruel, they'll warn other crows. Crows are petty. I relate. The same goes for people. Be kind. Be generous. Be useful. And you'll get shiny opportunities in return. So if you're building from the bottom, look sideways. Who's next to you? Who's a step ahead? Who needs your voice, your help, your insight? Find your crew. Invest in them. Protect them. Celebrate them. Because no matter how solo your hustle feels, success is a team sport. I used to think mindset was just a trendy buzzword thrown around by people selling $297 online courses and oversized coffee mugs that said, "Grind now, shine later." But after a while, after the third mental breakdown and the 17th unpaid invoice, I realized mindset wasn't a poster. It was the battlefield. Your mindset isn't just how you think, it's where you live. It's the default setting your brain returns to when everything else gets loud and heavy. And for a long time, mine was set to, "You're probably not good enough, but thanks for trying." You can't build from zero with that voice in your head. Or rather, you can, but you'll fight yourself the entire time. It's like trying to run uphill with a backpack full of wet regrets. So I started changing the script. Not with cheesy affirmations or post-its on my mirror that said, "You're a winner," though no shame if that works for you. I did it by slowly challenging every self-defeating thought like a petty lawyer. I'm not qualified. Objection. There are people with less experience doing the thing right now. I'm not talented enough. Objection. Talent is overrated. Consistency wins. What if I fail again? Objection. You've already failed. And survived. So, next? Rewiring mindset isn't a one-time job. It's like dental hygiene for your self-worth. You've got to floss that brain regularly or else the rot creeps in. I also started noticing how often I use qualifiers when talking about myself. I'm just a freelancer, I kinda do content, I'm trying to figure it out. That language? That's a mindset leak. So I practiced saying things out loud that felt too bold. I run a small business. I work with clients globally. I solve content problems. Did I believe it at first? Not really. But over time, it stopped feeling like lying and started feeling like becoming. And mindset doesn't mean blind optimism either. It's not about walking into a burning room and saying, "This is fine." It's about walking in, grabbing an extinguisher, and saying, "I've got this." That balance, between realism and belief, is what separates the burners out from the build back-uppers. There's a study from Stanford about something called the growth mindset, the belief that your abilities can be developed through effort and learning. It's been debated, sure. Some argue it's overly simplistic. But from the trenches of starting from nothing? It's gospel. If I believed I was fixed, just not the type of person who succeeds, I would have folded years ago. But I clung to the idea that I could become the type. One tiny, awkward step at a time. I remember this one gig I wanted so bad. A copywriting job for a startup with actual funding, read, not paying me in, exposure. I wrote the best application of my life. And they ghosted. I spiraled, obviously. Cursed every font on my resume. Questioned my whole existence. Then, mindset check, what else could this mean? Maybe they found someone faster. Maybe their founder changed directions. Maybe they're just bad at email. Not everything is a referendum on your worth. That alone? Life-changing. Side note, did you know goldfish have a longer attention span than the average internet user? 8 seconds versus 9. That's tragic. But also kind of beautiful, because it means if you can stay focused even a little longer than average, you're already ahead. That's what mindset gave me, a few more seconds of courage than fear. I also built rituals. Not habits, rituals. There's a difference. Habits are mechanical. Rituals are meaningful. Before big pitches, I'd light a candle, crack my knuckles like I was summoning ancestral freelancers, and play the same playlist. Totally unnecessary. Weirdly effective. Mindset is anchored in repetition. You become what you do consistently, and what you say to yourself consistently. So I stopped calling myself lucky when things went well. I started saying, that's a result of the work. Small change. Massive shift. Also boundaries. Mindset thrives in a protected environment. I stopped following people online who made me feel like a loser. You know the ones, posting 10-figure launches with captions like, so blessed, barely tried. Nope. Unfollow. I wanted voices that showed the process, not just the glossy screenshots. That's mindset. At one point, I had a folder on my desktop called Proof I Don't Suck. It was screenshots of good feedback, client compliments, wins I was too humble to post about. When imposter syndrome hit, I'd open it. Like armor. Like evidence. Because self-doubt is loud, but receipts whisper the truth. Let's be real, there are days I still feel like a fraud. Days I look at my to-do list and want to yeet it into the sun. But I've learned to pause, breathe, and ask, is this actually hard, or just uncomfortable? Spoiler, it's usually the second one. So if you're starting from zero, your first job isn't to get rich, go viral, or even get noticed. It's to believe, just a little, that you can get better. And then to keep believing, louder and longer than the voices in your head. Because mindset isn't magic. It's muscle. Build it. Use it. Protect it like it's your most valuable asset, because honestly, it is. Fear and I, we go way back. Like high school friends who never really liked each other but somehow still end up hanging out. And doubt? Doubt is fear's wingman. They always show up together, uninvited, wearing matching t-shirts that say, who do you think you are? They used to run my life. Every pitch, every post, every client call, I could hear them in the background. What if they hate this? What if you sound stupid? What if this is the thing that finally exposes you as the imposter you clearly are? Fun crowd. They don't show up when you're doing nothing. They only come out when you're about to do something that matters. Something risky. Something new. Something that might, gasp, change your life. So, in a weird way, their presence is a compliment. Still, that doesn't make them easier to deal with. I remember the first time I quoted a client a 4-figure project. I hovered over the send button like it was a self-destruct switch. My fingers were literally sweating. That's not an exaggeration. It felt like my keyboard was judging me. You think you're worth that? Fear asked. Doubt chimed in. They'll laugh. Or worse, ignore you. But I sent it. And you know what happened? They said yes. Without blinking. No negotiation. Just, sounds good. What do we sign? It messed me up in the best way. Because it proved something no motivational quote ever did: fear lies. Doubt lies. They're not oracles, they're just outdated security guards yelling, danger! When all you're doing is leveling up. There's this theory in neuroscience, still up for debate, mind you, called the error prediction model. Basically, your brain is constantly predicting what's about to happen. When it's wrong, it freaks out a little. That's fear. Not actual danger. Just your brain saying, "This doesn't match the pattern I know." Which means fear isn't always a sign you're off track. Sometimes it's a sign you're exactly where you should be, just in unfamiliar territory. I started noticing when fear popped up. When I pitched something bold. When I raised my rates. When I made content that was actually honest. That's when fear came tapping like, "Hey, you sure you want to do that?" So I created a rule. If fear showed up and it wasn't about physical danger or financial ruin, I probably needed to move toward it, not away. Scary email? Send it. Nerve-wracking video call? Book it. Job posting that felt too big for me? Apply anyway. Because fear is rarely a wall. It's a fog. It feels solid. But if you walk into it, you usually find there's air on the other side. Doubt, on the other hand, is trickier. It whispers. It doesn't yell like fear. It's the quiet voice that says, "That's probably not good enough," after you spent 3 hours tweaking a landing page. It's the silence after you post something and get 2 likes, one of which is your mom. I battled doubt by collecting evidence. Not feel-good stuff. Facts. Projects completed. Happy clients. Small wins. That time someone replied, "This made my day," to a post I almost didn't publish. Those were receipts. Side note, did you know sharks existed before trees? Like by hundreds of millions of years. That fact lives rent-free in my brain. Partly because it's cool, and partly because it reminds me that longevity doesn't always equal familiarity. Just because something's been with you forever, like fear, doesn't mean it belongs in your ecosystem anymore. I also started talking back to my fears. Out loud, sometimes. I'd be pacing my kitchen like, "Okay, yes, I might mess this up, but I also might not, so let's just calm down, Brenda." Fear's name is Brenda. Doubt is Steve. Eventually, I learned to expect their voices but not obey them. Like background noise. Like a neighbor's bad music. Annoying, but not the end of the world. There's a practice in therapy called exposure therapy. It's about gradually confronting the things that scare you so your brain learns they're not actually threats. I unknowingly did this with my work. Every time I did the thing that made me sweat, the sweating got a little less intense. The first podcast I was invited to? Terrified. The second? Still nervous. By the fifth? I showed up in a hoodie and Crocs with a cup of tea and said, "Let's go." That's growth. Not in the absence of fear, but in the management of it. Let me be clear, I'm not fearless. Not even close. I still worry about screwing up. I still double-check emails 6 times. I still overthink client calls like they're Oscar submissions. But I move anyway. The most dangerous part of fear and doubt isn't that they make you uncomfortable, it's that they make you small. They shrink your actions. They keep you in the loop of maybe later, and not quite ready. I lost a whole year once waiting for the right moment. A year I'll never get back. That's what fear costs you, time. Doubt robs you of potential. Together, they can turn your entire future into a never-published draft. So now, when fear shows up, I treat it like a signal. Not a stop sign, more like a traffic light flashing yellow. Proceed with caution, but definitely proceed. When I feel fear about something, I write down. What's the worst that could happen? What's the best? What's most likely? Almost always, the worst is temporary, the best is massive, and the most likely is manageable. And once you realize that, fear loses its teeth. Doubt? Same deal. I challenge it. I ask, if someone else said this to me, would I believe them? Usually, no. So why let that voice rent space in my head? If you're reading this and feeling the tight grip of fear around your neck, please hear this: you're not broken. You're growing. And growth feels like fear, because it is. Fear is just the body's way of saying, something important is happening. So honor the fear. Thank the doubt. Then do the thing anyway. I've often wondered how many people never start. How many dreams wither in the corners of minds, suffocated by the weight of what-ifs. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I embarrass myself? We sit with these thoughts like old friends, dragging our feet through life's uncertainty, convincing ourselves we'll start tomorrow, or the next week, or maybe never. It took me too long to realize that the biggest mistake you can make is waiting for perfect conditions. Waiting until you're ready. Waiting until the stars align. That's how nothing ever gets done. It's how people end up with a lifetime of what ifs instead of I tried. The truth? You will never be 100% ready. There will always be something else to learn, something else to perfect. Waiting for the stars to align is like waiting for a plane that never lands. Eventually you have to jump. I get it. It's terrifying. The first step, the first leap, the first anything, it feels like you're about to step into the unknown and leave everything familiar behind. But that's the magic. The magic part comes from realizing that the leap itself is the thing that propels you forward. Not perfect preparation. Not flawless execution. Just the decision to start. The first business I tried to build? A mess. I wanted to sell handmade leather wallets online. I thought I could be the next Etsy success story. So I bought expensive leather, got all excited, and spent a week watching YouTube videos on stitching techniques. But when it came time to launch, I froze. What if no one bought? What if my wallets were terrible? What if I wasn't cut out for this? You want to know what happened? I sold one wallet. To my mom. At a 50% discount. Did that kill my dream of being a leather mogul? Yes. Did it make me realize that I didn't know what I was doing? Also yes. But did it teach me the most valuable lesson of all? That one wallet was worth more than an entire year of planning and procrastination. It taught me that perfection didn't matter. Taking action, however small, mattered more than any hypothetical situation where everything lined up perfectly. And that's what you need to understand if you're starting from zero. If you're sitting there thinking, I'll do it once I know more. Or, I'll do it when I have more money. Or, I'll do it when I feel more confident. You're just postponing your own potential. Because there's no magical moment where the universe hands you everything you need on a silver platter. You have to make your own moment. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. The first time you hop on, you're going to wobble. You might fall. You might scrape your knees. But the more you ride, the better you get at balancing. And one day, without even realizing it, you're cruising down the street, grinning like a fool. That's what the journey from zero looks like. Not linear. Not neat. But progress, no matter how messy, is still progress. Another thing that tripped me up for the longest time was perfectionism. And let me tell you, perfectionism is just fear with a fancy suit. It sounds nice. It sounds like you're doing it right. But it's just another excuse to delay, to avoid, to stay in that comfortable zone where nothing gets done, and everything stays perfect, in theory but never in practice. I used to spend hours tweaking my website, obsessing over fonts, colors, and tiny details that no one would notice. I'd spend days crafting the perfect proposal, only to hesitate and never send it. I was paralyzed by the need to get it just right. Eventually, I learned the hardest lesson: done is better than perfect. Done means you're out there. You're testing the waters. You're learning from your mistakes. You're improving. Perfection is just an illusion. In the real world, progress is what matters. And I realize that even the most successful people have their moments of doubt. They have bad days. They have embarrassing moments. The only difference is, they don't let those moments stop them. They show up anyway, even when they feel unprepared. Even when they're terrified. So, yes, I understand the fear. I understand the hesitation. I understand the excuses that pop up like unwelcome guests at a party. But I also know that you can't wait forever. You'll keep waiting for conditions to be perfect, and when they're still not perfect, you'll wait again. And again. And soon, you'll find yourself in a cycle of, someday, that never comes. So here's the hard truth: you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to start. And once you start, things will begin to move. Momentum will build. The fear will start to fade, and the doubt will start to feel a little quieter. It might take a while to get the rhythm. But every step forward, no matter how small, is a step closer to who you're meant to be. Every pitch you send, every mistake you make, every no you receive, it's part of the process. Not the failure part, the learning part. The part that brings you closer to the life you've been imagining. So, if you're still waiting for the right time, let me be the voice that tells you, there is no right time. There's only now. The future will only arrive after you start moving. The second you start, you break free of the cycle. The second you stop waiting, you realize the truth. You already have everything you need to begin. Just do it. Messy. Imperfect. Uncertain. And once you do, you'll find that nothing is ever as scary as you thought it would be. The truth about success is that it's not a straight line. It's more like one of those toddler drawings that starts as a scribble, then loops, curves, and somehow comes back to the same spot, only slightly different. And that's okay. In fact, it's better than okay. Because here's the dirty secret: success isn't a perfect picture, it's a collection of imperfections, each one leading to the next step. I used to think that once I made it, once I crossed that invisible finish line, everything would magically fall into place. The money, the clients, the prestige, it'd all just click. But here's what no one tells you: once you cross that line, there's another one waiting. And another. And another. Because success isn't an endpoint. It's a process. When I first started making real money from my work, I thought I'd feel different. I thought, okay, now I'm legit. But you know what? That initial excitement faded fast. The doubts didn't disappear. The fear didn't vanish. I was still just me. Except now, I had more responsibility. More clients. More to lose. And that's when it hit me: there is no finish line. There's just the next step. And the step after that. Every new success comes with new challenges, new fears, new uncertainties. But that's where the growth happens. Not at the finish line, but along the way. Every new challenge is an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to refine the skills that will take you to the next level. I started getting clients who were more demanding, with bigger budgets. It felt amazing at first. But then I realized, with bigger budgets came higher expectations. Suddenly, I wasn't just a scrappy freelancer doing everything myself. I was managing teams, handling larger projects, juggling multiple stakeholders. It was exciting, yes, but also terrifying. The stakes were higher. The pressure was on. Thought success would quiet the fear. It didn't. It just gave it new words. Can you keep this up? Are you good enough for this level? The fear stayed. I just got better at walking through it. That's the thing with success. It doesn't make you immune to fear. It just changes the flavor of it. When you start from zero, you're afraid of failure. But once you start to make it, you're afraid of letting go. You fear that maybe you're not as good as everyone thinks you are. You fear that maybe it's all just a fluke. And that's when I had to make a choice: to keep pushing forward, even when the fear felt overwhelming. To keep moving, even when I didn't feel ready. Because here's the thing I learned: readiness doesn't come from waiting. It comes from doing. The more you do, the more you build the capacity to handle whatever comes next. You don't get ready by staying still. You get ready by taking action. In fact, action is the ultimate antidote to fear. The more I face fear, whether it was delivering a pitch to a potential client, launching a new service, or taking on a project that was bigger than anything I'd done before, the less powerful it became. Not because I became fearless, but because I became accustomed to the discomfort. I became comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's where true growth happens. I remember a conversation I had with a mentor, someone who had been through it all. I was talking about how difficult it was to manage clients, to keep up with the constant pressure to deliver, and to balance everything. And she said something that stuck with me. You'll always be stretched. Always. But you have two choices. You can either break under the pressure or you can grow. And the choice isn't about avoiding the pressure. It's about how you handle it. That's what I've come to understand. The pressure is part of the deal. You don't get to avoid it. But you can control how you respond. You can choose to learn from it, to grow through it, to use it as fuel for the next chapter. There's a phrase in the business world: comfort is the enemy of progress. And it's true. The second you get too comfortable, you stop growing. The second you stop pushing yourself, you start stagnating. And stagnation is a silent killer. I see it all the time. People who start out on fire, who push through the discomfort, who hustle their way up. And then, after a few wins, they settle. They think, I've made it. And sure, they might have made it financially, but they're no longer growing. They're just coasting. I knew I couldn't afford to coast. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after starting from zero. So, I kept challenging myself. I started taking on projects that scared me, projects that felt too big for me. I raised my rates. I took on clients who pushed me to do better. I experimented with new strategies, new skills, new ways of working. And yes, it was uncomfortable. It was scary. But that's how I kept moving forward. That's how I kept building. Working harder will get you somewhere. But working smarter? That's what takes you where you actually want to go. Strategy beats sweat, especially when your energy is limited. I learned to value my time. I learned that not every opportunity was worth pursuing. I learned to say no, to clients, to projects, to distractions that weren't aligned with my goals. And that decision was liberating. It gave me the freedom to focus on the things that truly mattered. One of the hardest things about success is knowing when to let go of the old version of yourself. The version that was just getting by. The version that thought doing it all alone was a badge of honor. The version that was afraid to ask for help. The truth is, you can't keep growing if you're still holding on to old habits. You need to shed them, one by one. It's a painful process, but it's necessary. And in the end, that's what success is really about: evolving, adapting, and continuing. No matter how far you've come, there's always another mountain to climb, another goal to reach, another version of yourself to become. So if you're starting from zero right now, I want you to remember this: you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything ready. You just have to start. And once you start, just keep going. Because success isn't the end goal. It's the journey. And the journey only ends when you stop. By now, if you're still here, you've probably noticed that everything I've talked about, success, failure, growth, fear, mindset, it all comes down to one thing: showing up. It's the most unsexy piece of advice I can give you, but it's also the one that'll change everything. Not showing up for someone else, not showing up for external validation, but showing up for yourself. And showing up, especially when you're at zero, feels a lot like getting up every day for a marathon, but the marathon is all uphill, and every single person around you is running faster. You're winded. You're tired. You're about to give up. But you know what? You keep going. When I started my journey, I wasn't thinking about what I wanted to achieve in a grand sense. Sure, I had big dreams, but they felt so distant that they were more like daydreams than tangible goals. I was just thinking about survival. About getting through the day. And that's the thing about starting from zero: it's not about the end game. It's about the next step. And when you're at zero, even taking that one small step can feel monumental. But each small step adds up. Each day you show up, even when you feel like the world is against you, that's the victory. You don't need to win every battle, but you need to keep showing up for the war. Because eventually, the small wins stack up. Eventually, you look back and realize that those tiny, insignificant actions you took, day after day, have compounded into something extraordinary. I learned that the hard way. In the beginning, I would stare at the end goal and think, that's too big. That's too far away. I'll never get there. But then, I'd focus on just the one task I could do that day. Maybe it was crafting an email. Maybe it was refining my pitch. Maybe it was watching a tutorial on something I didn't understand. Each time I made progress, however small, I felt like I was moving, and that was enough to keep me going. You see, the thing about starting from zero is that you have no illusion of being good enough yet. You can't afford to get cocky, and you definitely can't afford to act like you know everything. That's a trap I fell into once. I thought I was finally getting the hang of things, so I pushed myself to take on too much too quickly. The result? Burnout. Stress. A mountain of unfinished projects. And a pit in my stomach that told me I was doing it all wrong. But here's the thing, burnout happens when you stop paying attention to yourself. When you ignore your needs, your boundaries, and your limits. That's something I had to learn the hard way. Success doesn't have to come at the cost of your well-being. You can achieve things without sacrificing your health or peace of mind. So I began to set boundaries, both professional and personal. I started saying no. I stopped saying yes to every opportunity, every client, every project. I focused on what mattered and what fit into my vision for my business and my life. And that made all the difference. Boundaries are hard, though. Especially when you're starting out and you feel like you have to say yes to everything just to make ends meet. But over time, I realized that saying no to the wrong opportunities freed up time and energy to say yes to the right ones. And those yes? They paid off. They were the projects that not only made money, but also made me feel alive, excited, and fulfilled. When you start from zero, you get to define your journey. You don't have to follow anyone else's path or measure your success by anyone else's standards. Your success is your own, and it doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It doesn't matter if it takes you 6 months or 6 years to get there. What matters is that you keep going, and that you keep showing up. The only thing standing between you and success is your ability to keep going. Not your talent. Not your resume. Not your degree or your connections. Just your perseverance. Your refusal to stop. Your ability to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when you're tired, even when it's hard, and even when you have no idea where the next step will take you. The road from zero isn't glamorous. It's messy. It's hard. It's filled with self-doubt, rejection, and setbacks. But it's also filled with lessons, growth, and opportunities you never would have seen if you'd stayed comfortable, if you'd stayed safe. And once you start walking down that road, once you take that first step, you realize that the fear you thought would hold you back is just another part of the process. It's not a signal to stop, it's a signal that you're on the right path. I remember one of my first major setbacks, a project that completely failed. I was crushed. I couldn't stop thinking about what went wrong. But after a few days of sulking, I decided that I wasn't going to let this define me. I used that failure as fuel to improve. I figured out where I went wrong, learned from it, and made sure I didn't make the same mistake again. And that's the beauty of failure. It's not the end. It's the next lesson. There's an old saying. Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. That's what success really is, courage. The courage to keep going even when the odds are against you. The courage to take that first step when you don't know what's waiting for you at the end. And most importantly, the courage to show up for yourself. To believe in yourself enough to take that leap, even when you don't feel ready. Because here's what I can tell you now, if you keep showing up, if you keep moving forward, you will make it. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it will be worth it. And one day, you'll look back at where you started, at zero, and realize how far you've come. Because success isn't just about getting to the top. It's about the person you become while climbing. Somewhere along the way, I started to notice that success, while often celebrated in public, is largely a private battle. The people who make it aren't the ones who have it all figured out. They're the ones who have figured out how to keep going when it feels like nothing is working, when it feels like the whole world is telling you to stop. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't always talent, intelligence, or luck. It's grit. Grit is the invisible muscle that keeps you moving forward when everything in your body is telling you to quit. It's the quiet resolve to show up when you don't feel like it. It's the small, daily choices to keep going, even when the results seem non-existent. At the beginning, It felt like I was working in a vacuum. No recognition. No external validation. No one cheering me on from the sidelines. It was just me, trying to make something happen. But I stuck with it. Because I knew that the real work wasn't about the applause, it was about the persistence. It was about not waiting for permission. It was about carving out my space, no matter how long it took. It's easy to romanticize success. We see the finished product, the polished websites, the beautiful portfolios, the thriving businesses, and we think, that's what success looks like. But we rarely see the blood, sweat, and tears behind the scenes. We don't see the nights spent trying to fix broken websites at 3 a.m. We don't see the 100 failed pitches or the countless hours spent figuring out what went wrong. What we see is the result. The highlight reel. But real success? Real success is built in the trenches. It's built in those quiet moments when no one's watching. It's in the emails you send, the work you put in, the mistakes you learn from. I had this epiphany one day, not in a grand moment of clarity, but in the midst of an ordinary day. I was stuck in my home office, sipping coffee, staring at my computer, and realizing that the only thing keeping me from giving up was the sheer fact that I was still trying. Every single day. Even when it felt pointless. Even when it felt like no one noticed. I was still here. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a burst of inspiration. All you need is this: show up. Every single day. Even when it's messy. Especially when it's hard. I used to think I needed more knowledge, more skills, more resources to succeed. I thought that I had to have it all figured out before I could make any real progress. But eventually, I realized that the most important thing I needed was action. I didn't need everything to be perfect. I just needed to keep moving. To keep taking steps. Even if they were small. Even if they weren't perfect. I learned that success isn't linear. There are no clean, neat steps from zero to greatness. There are fits and starts. There are times when you feel like you're sprinting forward, and other times when you feel like you're trudging through mud. But that's all part of the process. That's what makes it real. The other thing I learned is that you're never truly done in this game. Even when you reach milestones, even when you achieve the things you set out to do, there's always another challenge on the horizon. There's always something new to learn, something else to improve. And that's the beauty of it. Success is a journey, not a destination. I once read a quote that stuck with me. Success is the sum of small efforts, repeated day in and day out. It sounds so simple, but it's so true. The tiny actions, the little steps, the small wins, they add up. They accumulate into something much bigger than you realize. In the beginning, I didn't see it. I didn't realize that sending one email, or taking one small action, was enough to create momentum. But eventually, I saw how all those small steps fit together. How the tiny efforts became the foundation for bigger wins. How consistency turned into opportunity. And here's the thing about consistency. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be regular. The more you show up, the more you learn, the more you improve. And the more you improve, the closer you get to the success you want. It's about showing up even when you don't feel like it. It's about doing the work, even when it doesn't feel glamorous. It's about being okay with the mess, with the mistakes, and with the process. That's something I had to learn the hard way. Success doesn't look like perfection. It doesn't look like polished Instagram posts or curated LinkedIn profiles. It looks like messiness and imperfection. It looks like the struggle, the setbacks, the mistakes. It looks like showing up day after day, even when you don't know if it's going to pay off. But over time, that mess becomes the tapestry of success. You don't have to wait for everything to be perfect. You just have to start. And then you have to keep going. Because success is made up of all the little things you do, day after day. It's the choices you make to keep moving forward, even when it's hard. And if you're starting from zero, that's exactly where you need to start, by showing up. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Even when it feels like you're not getting anywhere. Just keep going. Because success isn't a one-time event. It's a collection of small efforts, each one building on the last. It's about taking one step at a time, no matter how messy or imperfect that step is. And eventually, you'll look back and realize that those small steps turned into something incredible. I've often wondered if people who reach the top ever stop and think, how did I get here? How does it feel to look at a finished product, a completed journey, and feel the weight of all those years of effort condensed into one singular moment of success? The thing is, they probably don't. Once you've achieved something significant, you're already thinking about the next challenge, the next mountain to climb. That's one of the trickiest parts of success. Once you get a taste of it, you never really stop craving more. The goalposts keep moving, and the feeling of accomplishment isn't as sweet when you realize that the finish line is a myth. But here's the catch: success isn't about reaching a final destination. It's about the climb. You know, sometimes we get caught up in this idea that success means making it. That it's about achieving some idealized version of ourselves. The perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect life. And sure, those things are nice. But what I've learned is that success, real success, is about the process, not the product. It's about the work that goes into it. The effort. The dedication. The sacrifice. Those are the things that build you. Those are the things that matter. Not the flashy Instagram photos or the impressive headlines. It's the daily grind. The decision to show up when you feel like everything's falling apart. The ability to keep pushing even when you're exhausted. That's the stuff that defines success. I remember once, early on in my journey, I looked at a fellow entrepreneur who seemed to have it all figured out. They were effortlessly managing multiple businesses, traveling the world, always smiling in pictures, looking like the definition of success. I was in awe. I thought, if I could just have what they have, then I'll have arrived. But then I started talking to them. And I realized, despite the shiny exterior, they were struggling. They had doubts. They faced challenges. They felt the weight of their decisions. And that's when it hit me: success isn't about having everything perfect. It's about learning to handle the mess, the chaos, and the imperfections. Success is the ability to show up every day and keep going, even when it's hard. That realization was a game changer for me. I stopped measuring success by how perfect my life looked on paper. I started measuring it by how well I handled setbacks, how well I adapted, and how well I kept learning. Because the truth is, there's no such thing as a perfect life. There's just a life that's lived fully, with all the ups and downs, all the highs and lows. Here's another thing I've learned: the people who start from zero and make it are the ones who learn to embrace discomfort. They don't shy away from it. They face it head on. They understand that growth only happens when you push yourself past your limits, when you leave your comfort zone behind and venture into the unknown. Every time I've grown, it's been because I was willing to step into the unknown. The first time I pitched a big client, I was terrified. The first time I raised my rates, I was convinced I was about to lose everything. The first time I hired someone, I thought I was in way over my head. But in each of those moments, I chose to lean into the discomfort. I chose to trust the process, even when I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. And you know what? It paid off. Growth doesn't happen in a straight line, and it doesn't happen without discomfort. But when you learn to embrace that discomfort, when you learn to sit with the fear, the doubt, and the uncertainty, you realize that it's all part of the process. You start to see that every setback, every failure, every no, is just one more lesson, one more step closer to where you need to be. And here's the crazy part: the more you embrace discomfort, the easier it gets. The more you step into uncertainty, the more you learn how to navigate it. Eventually, you get to a point where you realize that discomfort isn't something to avoid, it's something to seek out. Because that's where the magic happens. This doesn't mean that everything becomes easy. It doesn't mean that fear disappears. But it does mean that you start to realize that fear isn't a sign to stop. Fear is a sign that you're growing. And when you stop running from fear, you realize that you're stronger than you ever thought possible. I'm not the same person I was when I started. I'm not even close. And that's the beauty of the journey. Every mistake, every challenge, Every victory has shaped me into who I am today. And I'm proud of that person. Not because they've made it, but because they've kept going. And that's all I want for you. I want you to keep going. Even when it's hard. Even when it feels impossible. Even when everything in you is screaming to quit. Because that's when the real growth happens. That's when the magic happens. So, if you're at the beginning of your journey, or if you've been at it for a while and things are feeling tough, remember this: success isn't about how quickly you get there. It's about how you get there. It's about the person you become along the way. It's about showing up, even when you're scared. It's about learning, growing, and evolving with every step. And when you look back on it one day, when you finally reach that milestone, that moment where you feel like you've arrived, you'll realize that the true success wasn't in the destination. It was in the journey. In the hard work. In the persistence. In the belief that you could make it. So keep going. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because that's the secret to success. The final piece of the puzzle, the part that pulls everything together, is the idea of giving back. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle, the grind, the me mentality when you're starting from zero. After all, you're trying to survive, trying to make something of yourself. And that's totally valid. The road is hard, and it's easy to forget that there's a bigger picture beyond your own immediate success. The truth is, reaching the top is only half the journey. The other half is learning how to use that success to lift others. Because real fulfillment doesn't come from what you gain, it comes from what you give. Giving back doesn't always mean financial generosity, though that's important too. It means offering your time, your expertise, and your knowledge. It means being willing to reach back and help someone else who's on the same road you were on, stumbling through the darkness. When you've been given the chance to grow, it's your responsibility to pay it forward. When I first started building my business, there was a moment when I realized that I wasn't in this alone. I had people, mentors, friends, even strangers on the internet, who helped me in ways I could never repay. They gave me their advice, their feedback, their encouragement. And even when they didn't know it, they became a part of my journey. They were part of my success. That's when I understood that success, true success, is communal. It's built on relationships, support, and lifting each other up. And as I started to see my own growth, I knew I needed to give that same kind of support to others. I knew I needed to pass it on. I started mentoring people who were where I used to be. I answered questions. I offered advice. I opened doors when I could. It wasn't always easy. It required time. It required energy. But it was worth it. Because seeing someone else succeed because you shared what you learned, there's no greater reward. It's funny, isn't it? The very thing that made us stronger, the grind, the struggle, the constant fight against failure, is also what makes us able to help others. Our experiences, our failures, our lessons, they're what give us the wisdom to guide those coming after us. Now, giving back doesn't always mean becoming a mentor. It doesn't always mean having all the answers. Sometimes, it's simply about being there. It's about sharing what you've learned in a blog post, a podcast, or a tweet. It's about taking a moment to listen to someone else's struggles and offering a kind word. It's about being present for someone else. Because here's what I've come to understand: the true measure of success is not how much you achieve, it's how much you help others achieve. It's about knowing that your success has ripple effects. That by lifting someone else, you're making the world a little better, a little brighter. And when you give, you get. It's not a transaction, it's a cycle. The more you give, the more you receive. It's like a conversation where you're both learning, both growing, both elevating each other. That's the kind of success that leaves a lasting impact. You've probably heard the phrase, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." And while that's true to some extent, I think it's more accurate to say, it's not just what you know, it's what you're willing to share. Because the more you share, the more you grow. The more you open up your knowledge, your resources, your time, the more you connect with others, the more you align yourself with people who are going through the same thing. That's how communities are built. That's how movements are started. It's by recognizing that success isn't a solo journey, it's a shared experience. And the more we help each other, the faster we all move forward. As I look back at the road I've traveled, the road I'm still walking, I can honestly say that the greatest joy comes from seeing others succeed. It's from watching someone who was once where I was take that first step, then that second, then finally hit their own stride. When you see someone else's eyes light up as they realize they're capable of more than they thought, that moment is worth more than any award, any accolade, any dollar figure. I want to leave you with this: if you're starting from zero right now, if you're feeling stuck, lost, unsure of where to go, know this: you are not alone. You are part of a much larger story. And that story isn't just about you. It's about all of us, pushing forward, stumbling, learning, growing together. Success doesn't have to be a solo pursuit. In fact, it shouldn't be. It's about lifting others as you rise. It's about passing on what you've learned. It's about creating a space where others can thrive, just like you did. The more you help others, the more you help yourself. So, don't wait until you've made it to start giving back. Do it now. Reach out. Share your knowledge. Offer your help. Be the mentor you wish you'd had. Be the person who lifts others up, because that's the legacy you'll remember, and the one others will thank you for. And when you look back at all the small steps you've taken, all the struggles you've overcome, and all the people you've helped along the way, you'll realize that success isn't a destination. It's a journey. And it's a journey that's always better when it's shared.